We are so grateful you continue to listen to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. We have a very special week for you. And the question we want to ask is, what are the things you do, not your partner,
not your spouse?
What are the things you do that mess up your relationships?
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to call this week How to Ruin Your Marriage. And if you know how to ruin it, you'll know how to help it.
Yeah, if you can recognize what it is that you are doing, it's really always easy to see what the other person's doing wrong. But if you can take responsibility and see what you are doing, then you get to take responsibility for that. It's easier for you to fix it. It's easier for you to know how to make it better. And to me, it seems like one of the first things is you have to want to, right? And I want to start off by saying, I am incredibly lucky. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on film. I'm not saying that because I'm on a podcast. I think I'm an amazing person. I really do. But I'm not an easy person. I'm not easy. So I'm intense. I'm challenging at times. And I have the perfect partner. I really do. You are kind and thoughtful and grounding, and you don't react. You are an amazing human being.
So this is our second marriage, both of us. And
I figured it out.
We know how to mess things up.
Yeah.
And if you know how to mess them up, then if you're paying attention, you actually can make magic.
Can I say
something?
something?
I think of the 13 years we've been together, it's been magical.
Yeah.
And I love when you said the only way I'm running is if I'm chasing you.
You're not going anywhere till death do us part.
It's connected.
So,
but I want to do it in these 4 podcasts in this week to really look at our 4 circles. And in the first podcast, we'll talk about the biological things you do to mess up your relationships. And then we'll talk about the psychological things you do, and then we'll talk about the social things you do, and even the spiritual things that you do. So biologically, what are the things people do to
drink too much,
their relationships?
Drink too much, do drugs, watch pornography, in my opinion, if they're addicted to it and not paying attention to their partner and they're not present. Those are things that I have seen, we've seen, right? Where people are not present in their marriages, where they're not their best selves, where they're not showing up. I guess the pornography part would be not biological.
The what?
The pornography part would not be biological,
It's
but
totally
drinking too much.
In the sense that it can be addictive, that if you're not careful, it can actually shrink your frontal lobe.
Right.
That
you're comparing your marriage to something not real.
Expectations that are not real. And but when I think of biology, I think of you had a head trauma and no one's assessed it. And you are acting badly because your frontal lobes or your temporal lobes have been hurt. And so a biological way to screw up your relationships
does not treat your brain.
Is that you have a brain that's not functioning right, and you don't get the help you need.
Yeah, depression and anxiety are also things, OCD are also things. I've actually seen people who have, called me and said, hey, I need to come in because they are struggling with depression, anxiety, OCD, and it's destroying their marriages.
And those are, at least in part,
biological. Yeah.
And so I like what you said. So drugs and alcohol as we come close to the 4th of July.
Well, and how many domestic violence situations have you seen? Drug and alcohol, and I mean, that's the trigger, right? That's the thing that sets it off, is your frontal lobes are down. When you drink alcohol, when you do drugs, it affects your frontal lobes. It affects your judgment, your impulse control. Someone says something that makes you angry where you normally be able to control it. The next thing you know, you're screaming, yelling, out of control, domestic violence occurs. It's terrible.
I often ask people when I lecture, how many of you are married? And then half the people raise their hand, and I go, is it helpful for you to say everything you think in your marriage? And everybody laughs and they're shaking their head. No, it's not helpful. Yet when you drink alcohol,
you say more of what you think.
Yeah. The first thought in your head tends to get out.
And not in a nice way.
Even if you don't believe the thought, it can damage you. It can hurt you.
Yeah.
And so alcohol's involved in more divorces, in my experience as a psychiatrist over the last 40 years, than virtually any other substance. Also, this is something people might not know. If you didn't sleep well the night before, if you get less than 7 hours of sleep at night, you have lower overall blood flow to your frontal lobes, which then means more bad decisions.
And I know you guys have experienced this. I certainly have. So we had so much going on for that, like a week in our house, visitors, whatever. And I just didn't sleep for like 3 nights in a row. And I just woke up foggy, not feeling well. And it's just like, fortunately, we know this about each other. And but I just got up and I was just like, I don't want to do what I have to do today. And I just, there was nothing, we didn't get in a fight or anything. And there was not even an argument, but my brain was not happy. I was not having happy thoughts. And then I got 3 nights of sleep, woke up, and I literally, the first thought out of my, in my head, and the first words out of my mouth were, wow, I feel so good. I'm so happy. I mean, it's just the difference when you get that sleep, how your brain processes. So I know you guys know what I'm talking about.
And, we've all talked about the bright mind's risk factors, but, quickly, if you have low blood flow to your brain, you're going to have more impulse control and less empathy. So if you want to screw up your relationships, never think of things from the other person's point of view.
Right. Just be selfish.
That'll ruin it. Retirement and aging, the older you get, the less active your brain is, unless you're super serious, unless you're a brain warrior. So you have to be careful. I turned 65 this year and I walk a lot.
Stay busy.
To keep my brain
Volunteering
healthy.
is a good thing.
And I take my supplements and I'm learning new things. Inflammation. If you have inflammation in your body, you're more likely to have depression and dementia, which means when you're depressed, and you remember when you were depressed.
Oh yeah, I couldn't think about anybody but myself, because you can't.
It's like your brain's in a tunnel, and the tunnel has no windows and no doors. Dark, and your partner gets sad too, and they get lonely because you disconnected.
Well, it's not intentional, but you become self-centered because it's painful. When you're in pain, you become self-centered. So.
And then we talked about head trauma and getting it treated. Toxins could be where the alcohol is. Mind storms, which is a new concept you'll hear from me, but it's basically one of your temporal lobes is not working right. And you can have mood instability, irritability, temper problems. People often get diagnosed with bipolar. They're not. They have their temporal lobes that aren't working right, often from a head trauma. Getting that taken care of. If your hormones are not right, your relationships are not right.
They file for divorce more than any other age group.
Or PCOS.
Yeah.
That when
you think like a guy.
Testosterone's high, you can be more irritable and
I had PCOS.
Hard to attach. So glad we got that treated for you. If you have low blood sugar, so there's this great study that they took 107 couples and they measured their blood sugar right before bed. And then they gave them voodoo dolls. And they said, we want you to express your feelings about your partner by putting pins in the dolls. And the people who had the lowest blood sugar had more than twice the number of pins in the dolls.
Yeah.
And Tana has this hangry thing.
So hangry. So bad.
And
he just looks at me and doesn't say a word and immediately goes somewhere where I can get food. It's just a thing that
Right. So
and my daughter's
from a
the same way.
biological standpoint, how do you mess up a relationship is you don't think about or care about or take care of your brain, which is absolutely essential if you want to have a great relationship.
One thing you mentioned was point of view, and one thing that I really like that we do, because we're not perfect. We have, disagreements, and we've had some sticky arguments in the past. Fortunately, not a lot of them, but we have. And what I like that we do, everybody argues differently, and it's really important to know how you argue and how you guys communicate. One thing I like that we do is we're both willing to get an argument, step back and go our separate ways for 15 or 20 minutes, because that's what it takes me. It takes me. You need to know that. If you stay in someone's face, if you just stay there and just keep at them, but they're a person who needs a little time to process, I'm a person who needs a little time to process. Give me 15 or 20 minutes to go to my corner. Let me think about it. Let me think about your point of view. I will generally come back and go, I'm really sorry for this. This is how I feel about this. But if you stay in someone's face who needs that time, it's not usually going to be a good outcome. I can tell you from my perspective, it wouldn't be. And vice versa.
And I call it the bathroom technique. That if somebody's stuck on something and they're just not letting you go, tell them you have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, I like that.
Virtually nobody will argue. And even if you don't have to go to the bathroom, go there for just a few minutes to give the argument space for people's singulates to calm down so that you can shift into what is the goal in my relationship. Does my behavior fit the goal I have?
So what's really interesting, though, Chloe and I, my daughter, so it's really interesting for you guys to know personality types, because where you and I don't have this problem, Chloe and I were butting heads really hard. She's a very strong-willed child. I would need time to go sort of process things, but I couldn't figure out why that would literally just cause her to flip out and send her up a tree. Finally, now she's older and we've been able to figure this out. To her, that feels like she has this abandonment issue. She feels like she's being abandoned somehow. When we were able to figure this out, and I was able to explain to her why I do it and how she needs me to not go away, but I need her to give me space, right? Really important to understand those dynamics.
And we'll talk about communication in the social. But what's coming up? So what are the things you're doing? I hope you answered that question. What are the things you're doing to ruin your relationships? Take responsibility and then post that.
And tag us.
Yeah. Brain Warriors Way podcast. And then share it on your social media. As we grow this podcast, Brain Warriors recruit other Brain Warriors so that you're creating your own network of people to support you on this healing journey.
And we would be grateful if you've learned something, if you go to brainwarriorswaypodcast.com, if you have learned anything, we would be so grateful if you would write that and give us a review.
And also leave your questions. Stay with us. Welcome back to How to Ruin Your Marriage Week.
It's our sneaky way of helping you not to ruin your marriage, but
well, if you know how to ruin it, then hopefully you'll know how to help it. And in this podcast, we're going to talk about the psychological ways. So we'll talk about psychological warfare. But ask yourself a question. What is it in your background, in your development? Because when I think of psychology, I think of it's how you think and what you grew up in that sets the template for who you are.
Yeah.
And what is it in your background that may be interfering with you having the best relationship possible?
So we started off in the last episode talking about how this is not our first marriage, and we learned a lot. And fortunately for us, we have a really strong marriage. We communicate really well. We realize, you're the yin to my yang, like you're the grounding force. I'm a little intense. But knowing those things is really important. What I figured out the first time around when I didn't do it right, when I first went, I wouldn't commit to you because I didn't trust myself, and I thought I'm never going through that again. And I figured if I couldn't figure it out the first time, I'm certainly not going to do this again, right? And I went through a lot of therapy actually before I would commit to a relationship and moving forward, which I think was really smart. Now I know it hurt. I know it drove you crazy and made you insane for a while, but it was a smart thing to do.
Holding on to hurts from the past will ruin your relationship.
It's one of the things you need to know.
And it took me a while to get over you coming and going, but I'm over it.
But it was a necessary thing for me.
But holding on to things is not helpful.
No.
And one of the things that really helped me is that I knew what it was like to be pressured.
So you thought about it from my point of view.
Relationship that I wasn't quite ready for, and so I gave you space.
Right.
And then yes, it is true. I called you a black widow because you would eat men.
No.
And now you are the black widow that's actually guarding the cage
I'm guarding
of our
the cage.
house.
So one thing I want to point out, though, is that when I first started doing therapy, I remember being angry, and bitter about the other person and what he did. And then all of a sudden it shifted and it went to personal responsibility. And it was, okay, I can't control that. Let it go. What was my part? Because that's the only part that I can take with me into another relationship, if I want to have this relationship with this amazing person and I don't want to mess it up, that's the only thing I can focus on was my part. What can I do differently? And that's when it shifted. That's when it changed. And that's a really important, I think, factor. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
So from a psychological standpoint, responsibility is probably the most important thing. What is it I can do today to make the relationship better?
Because if you're a victim, you can't.
If I think about my first marriage, I was angry and almost justified in not being nice because of some
we can always tell ourselves that
difficulties that were going on. But was that helpful?
No.
It was not helpful. So I work on this with my patients all the time, but that means I work on it with myself. What's my goal? So you need to know what's your goal in the relationship.
You want to be divorced or you want to be married and have a loving marriage?
I have a very clear goal, and it's always been the same with Tana. I want because I'm a kind person. I want kindness in my life. I want a kind, caring, loving, supportive, passionate relationship. I always want that. And so it's important. What do you want in your relationship? And then does my behavior, not hers, does my behavior get me what I want? And that is a frontal lobe function.
It is.
So it's a brain function, but it's from a software point of view. It's a psychological strategy. Know what you want and then ask yourself, does my behavior get me what I want? And it's not selfish because what I want is not selfish.
No.
It's good for both of us.
Right. What I love about what you said, here's what's super important about that. What you said is you focus on what you want and you behave that way. And let me tell you why that's so important. Because there are times, okay, let's just face it. We have PMS, we have menopause, whatever. We've got kids, we have bad days, right? But because you do not know, but all of our problems start with men. Do you see that? Menopause, anyways, menstruation, anyways. So the reason it's so important what you said, what I love about that. So if I'm having a bad day, and I'm just irritable, whether it's hormonal, whether it's situational, whatever the reason, it doesn't matter what the reason is. If I'm having a really bad day and I snap at you and you're not clear about that goal and you snap back and we now engage, right? Because you weren't clear about that goal, we engage. And you're justified. In your head, you're justified.
I'm justified.
So now we're engaged in this fight and we can't sort of end it. Now we have to dig in and make our positions correct, right? But because you were clear about your goal, this actually happens now and then. So once in a while. So I'll snap, you stay grounded. You actually stay centered and focused on what it is you want. You say something kind instead. Rather than me needing to dig in and make myself right about what I said, I feel like an idiot, actually. So then I realize how nice you are, and I must apologize. Does that make sense?
Right. Well, you have the same goal.
Right.
You have the same goal.
But rather than digging in, that causes me to put my guard down. So I love what Byron Katie says. Defense is the first act of war.
And I know that I can make you angry.
Oh, you can.
Under 8 seconds.
Fortunately, you don't do it often.
But why would I want to do that unless I was conflict driven?
Right.
So a lot of my ADD patients are conflict driven. They play this game called Let's Have a Problem. But why would I do that unless I was not thoughtful?
Right.
And all of you listening, I really want you to do this exercise. It's in virtually all of my books called The One-Page Miracle. On one piece of paper, write down what you want. Ask yourself, does my behavior get me what I want? And if it doesn't, then don't do it. It's not going to help you.
Yeah. And you get to be a role model and an example. Another thing I love about you. You are a role model and an example when you do that, and it makes me want to be a better person. Hopefully I do some of those things that make you want to be a better person, and that's important in a relationship.
I'm so happy being married to you.
Me too.
I would be so sad if you went away.
Don't say that.
I would. Honestly, I'd
I know,
be
but
super
let's not
sad,
focus
which
on
is
that.
like, so what's really important? Me being right.
Right.
Me being
Or happy.
in control. And we talked about, what are those experiences growing up? And I grew up with a dad that
Needed to be right.
He was the king
Right.
at home. Nobody
Absolutely.
argued with him.
He was the patriarch.
And so I grew up with really what has become an outdated model of the man is in charge.
Yeah.
And if I took that into our marriage, we would...
Oh, that would not go well. But one thing,
man is in charge. And so I have to check myself because my goal is never to dominate you. My
That's
goal
probably
is
a
to
good
be
goal,
your
never to-
partner. If I had that goal, you would not be my partner.
So one thing,
Because you're beautiful and you're smart, but you're also strong-willed and you have red hair.
yeah. And red hair is God's warning signal. One thing that I learned from my mom.
I didn't say that. She did.
So I grew up in a pretty chaotic environment, but one thing that my mom taught me that I have never forgotten was because I was pretty strong-willed even as a kid, right? So I was timid as a little kid, then I became strong-willed over time. And she used to say to me, I had this sort of righteous thing that my daughter has now. And she used to say this one thing to me, and I've taught it to my daughter because it's a really important thing. You can be right and you can be dead right. Is being right the most important thing in this situation? And it just never... I was like, what?
Yeah, are you the kind of partner that if your partner says something that's just factually wrong, that you have to correct them? It's like, I try not to correct people unless it's material to the situation.
Okay,
if it just doesn't matter, leave it alone.
Well, I do
You're
admit,
not
I
the
told you
English
so.
teacher.
Yeah, but I do admit I told you so is a problem for me.
Oh, my goodness.
No, I'm addicted to I told you so. That is I'm admitting it. So it's just an issue for me. Thank God you just laugh at me and walk away. So, yeah. So, yeah, I admitted it.
Forgiveness falls under this psychological circle. Holding on to things from the past can really devastate your relationships. Yeah. So listen to our podcast on forgiveness. When we come back, we're going to talk about the social ways you screw up your relationship.
Don't forget to tell us the one thing you've learned. Please go to brainwarerswaypodcast.com. Let us know what you've learned, what you want to hear about. And if you are so inclined, please, we're asking, leave us a review. Thank you. Welcome back. We're having so much fun with this topic on how to really mess up your marriage. So,
how to ruin your
relationship. Ruin your relationships.
Wait. So the question for this podcast is, who are the people in your life that are collaborating with you to ruin your relationship? Who are the people,
Hardest people for you to deal with,
that are conspiring with you
See, I like this.
to hurt your relationship?
So, okay, ladies, we need to have a talk. We just need to talk for a minute. This is something that I see so many women do. I don't know if men do this as much, but I know women do it, and I've seen it. And it was something that I vowed to myself before, when we got together, before we got married, that I would never do. And I actually started this before that, but because I saw so many marriages ruined over this, and people just becoming miserable. When you have a problem, and this is funny, this is something my mom taught me as well. When I got married, my mom said, do not come to me and complain about your marriage. And I was like, what? She goes, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear your problems in your marriage. And I was like, wow, that was harsh. But she was right. And I love that. And here's why. She's like, if he's beating you, then come to me. Otherwise, I don't want to hear it. And I really appreciate that now. I didn't really understand it then. But here was the thing. She was not going to be the meddling mother-in-law, number one, which I really appreciate, and I'm sure you do. But the other thing is, I see women do this. They get together. We're the, gatherers, men are the hunters, but we get together in this little gathering group and we just start yip about all of our problems. And the minute you start doing that, you will find the thing that is wrong and your brain will begin to spin on it. And I really don't like that. I promised myself I would not do that. And I told myself that if you and I had problems, I'd never go to my girlfriends and start doing that. And I had one friend that would look for those problems, and she's no longer my friend. She's no longer my friend. The friends that I have that I go to are friends who tell me, "Oh, I'll pray with you," but that's not how you handle this. I mean, they'll actually hold me accountable. Those are the kinds of friends you want. You want to ruin your relationship? You want to mess up your marriage? Have a bunch of girlfriends who actually have some interest in you having problems because they want to go out with you, because they are not happy themselves, because whatever reason. That is how you mess up your marriage fast.
That's like worth the whole podcast. You did that in 2.5 minutes. I'm so proud of you.
I've just seen it too many times.
Who you hang out with. You become like the people you hang out with. And if you're spending time with people who are unhappy in their relationships, they will actually tend to magnify the unhappiness you might have and make you second guess yourself.
Yep.
Hanging out with people who ask the question, what is it you can do better?
Yep.
Will help you so much, because
and when a friend prays
people are
with you,
contagious.
When friends pray with you, what they're in essence doing is spinning it in a positive way. They're looking for what's good. They're looking for how you can fix it. And that's really important.
And often when you confide into your friends or coworkers on how awful your partner is, they're not getting
the full story.
The full story.
No.
And so they're giving you advice based on your skewed presentation of what's going on. And
even if you believe it 100%, right? Perception is reality. It's only your perception. It's not both sides.
And so, I often say bonding, because we're talking about relationships, require two things. It requires time, actual physical time, and a willingness and skill in listening. So if you want to ruin your relationship, don't spend any time with your partner, be a workaholic, and don't listen. When they say something, talk over them. And as soon as something comes out of their mouth, you feel like you have to dominate the conversation and tell them your 2 cents rather than really trying to understand what they're saying. And that's hard for a lot of people in this society of noise. If you think of CNN and Fox and there's really not a good model.
Well, and some of us grew up not feeling listened to. And so sometimes that's the motivation. We feel like we're not being listened to. So we have to be, and that actually you've been really good at helping me with that. I also worked in a trauma unit where it was like chaotic and you had to sort of like speak up, and it's a personality trait. But that really, you helping me with that, especially with my daughter, has helped with all of my relationships. Learning to just shut up, bite my tongue. It's not always easy.
And I want you to communicate clearly, but what's really important, maybe even more important, is really understanding your partner. And that requires hearing him or her out and then repeating back what you hear to make sure you're clear. Too often, people sit on a lot of pain, and when that pain gets poked, we overreact, and you're dealing with the pain, not the person.
Right. I like that. Another thing, this thing, the phone, social media, it's a problem. So you need to be aware of what you are focusing on when you're with your partner. Presence is a really important thing. And I know we're busy. I know even in our situation, we have business to run. Life is busy. Life is, intense, but at least dedicate a certain amount of time. If that is you and you're busy like that and you have a lot that you must attend to, I know a lot of doctors and surgeons and things like that, they are married to that phone because they are on call all the time. But at least dedicate a certain amount of time with the exception of emergencies or whatever, that you're not going to be on your phone because it feels to the other person like they don't have your full attention. At least for me, I'll get up and walk away. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to compete with it. I call it the mistress. So I won't compete with it. It's like either I'm important enough for you to focus on while we're together during this time, or I have other things I can be doing. And so it's just a really important thing. Think about what you're doing. It's a hard thing. It's become this addiction in our society, and it's created for that reason. So just pay attention to it. Just know that's why it was created. It's why it's the way it is, and try to be aware of it.
And it's good to develop rituals. So if you want to ruin your relationships, have no time rituals. So
I love our mornings.
I make you coffee.
And we sit together, and I love
not coffee. I make you your...
a quarter calf cappuccino.
Cappuccino that's on TanaAmen.com. What's it called?
It's...
pumpkin spice.
Yeah.
Cappuccino. And Tana has manipulated me to thinking that only I can make it the way I do.
Only he can make it and have it taste that good.
Nonsense,
no, it's
but,
amazing.
Having folklore.
And he'll often say... That's okay. Here's another tip. Here's another tip. If you nitpick at things with your partner, I think that focusing on little things that aren't that not necessarily that important, and if they're important to you, bring them up in a positive way. But you'll often, because we are so busy, you'll often say to me, "Did I tell you I love you today?" Which is a really sweet thing. And sometimes you didn't because we're busy. We jump out of bed, we're running, we're like whatever. But rather than going, "No, you didn't." I'll stop for a minute and I'll think, and usually it's, "You made my coffee this morning. You showed me. You didn't, So it's a ritual
that we have, whether it's, 20 minutes in the morning, we just sit and talk about our days and what's going on. And we love it when our teenage daughter joins us. But that's a ritual.
Right.
And then we have time over the weekend to spend together.
Right. And being aware that those actions for me, they equate to you telling me you love me. And I don't need to nitpick at you because you didn't say it.
Yeah, nitpicking is generally not helpful.
No.
If you're doing that, you have to ask yourself, what's the goal? I mean, if the goal is to torture the other person, then go for it, right?
But
if it's conscious, or if it's what your mom and dad used to do and you're just replicating that goal, you want to stop it.
But there also might be a different reason. There may be something else you're actually trying to achieve, and there's probably a better way to do it, and you're just not aware that that's what you're doing. So pay attention.
So who are you hanging out with that is collaborating with you to ruin your relationship? You might want to rethink that relationship or that time.
I like what you said in the last episode.
Don't post their name.
No, don't post their name. Please don't. We don't need, no, we're not starting a war. I like what you said in the last episode when you said you need to know your goal right? You need to know your goal, and that's how you base your actions on that goal. Like, you want to have a good marriage, and so is what I'm doing getting me what I want? And that's why I said in the beginning of the episode, I had a friend who was constantly looking for the negative because that friend was miserable in her marriage. She wanted me to spend more time with her. So she would find something negative about you, or that friend is no longer my friend. And that's why, because I know my goal. And so know your goal. Are the friends you're hanging out with, not just your actions, are the people you're hanging out with helping you achieve that goal? It's really important.
So, what's the single most important thing you learned from this podcast? We would love for you to post it on your social media.
And tag us.
Brain Warriors Way Podcast. We would just be so grateful. Leave us a review.
You can also tag us.
brainwarriorswaypodcast.com. And if you have a question, leave it there, because we're going to spend some episodes coming up just answering your question.
And you can tag us personally as well. Tana Amen or Doc Amen. Just tag us and let us know. We want to hear from you.
We'll be back, and we're going to talk about the spiritual ways you mess up your relationships. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're going to talk about your spirituality and ruining relationships.
I actually like this series.
How are we going to do that? I want you to think about your relationship with God, your relationship with your deepest sense of meaning and purpose, and how that's impacting the relationship that you have.
If you're spiritually bankrupt.
We're talking primarily about love relationships, but it really can impact
all relationships.
Any.
Because if you're spiritually bankrupt, it's it's really challenging. If you're spiritually bankrupt and you're not whole within yourself, it's pretty hard to give to other people.
So what question should we ask? Is how is your sense of spirituality impacting your primary
And if you're not sure, then that's okay. Post that too. Ask us questions, because we actually have a whole chapter on finding your purpose in Brain Warriors Way, on how to find your purpose, on how to understand your deeper sense of spiritual connection. For us, it's a religious. It's God. But for some people who aren't in that place, connecting to a sense of purpose is an important step. So when I talk about purpose with my patients, I ask them about their relationship with God, how they see that, their relationship with the planet, their relationship with the past, and their relationship with the future. So, sort of upward, outward.
Well, it sort of comes out and across, which is cool. But for me, the past is I primarily think about my grandfather, who I was named after, who was my best friend growing up. I think about how important my past is, but I also think about my grandchildren and their children. So I'm thinking about the future, my relationship with the planet, because if the planet's not here, we're not going to be here. And then my relationship with God.
That's really
What's your purpose? And as you said, if you don't have a purpose, then it's easy to act in ways that are harmful to other people. I'm obviously very purposeful when it comes to you, because you're my primary relationship. And,
you are
and my
purposeful.
mother, speaking of what, happened in the past, my mom was actually super clear, and she had 7 children, that my father was her number one priority.
It's interesting,
that it wasn't the children.
And she's not
so many of you are like, oh no, the children are it.
And she's also not a meddling mother-in-law. So, she's...
But as much as I love all of our children, that you are going to be here long after they are gone. And I take care of my marriage first. It's the first thing. I do.
I actually think that gives kids a sense of stability and settles them.
And I've often said and heard it said that the best thing you can do for your kids is love your wife or love your husband, that they get a model. And with half the marriages ending in divorce, divorce is not innocuous for children. It's harmful for them. Now, being in a relationship that's filled with chronic conflict is not good for them either. But
I mean, so you have to protect your children also.
So knowing your purpose in the relationship, and obviously, if you are attracted to someone who doesn't have the same spirituality you have, or
and the same
sense
values
of purpose
also,
or values, but they make your toes tingle, you want to really think about
that's not going to stay there forever. So it's got to be a deeper connection. I mean, that's might be fun for a little while, but if it's not a deeper connection, if you don't share the same values, just look at the divorce rate. I mean, that doesn't last if you can't connect at a deeper level. So I love that we share the same purpose for helping people, right? And we don't always agree on the situations, like the actual situation in the moment to moment, but our deeper values are very much in line. And so that's what keeps us connected.
So what are the spiritual things you've seen that screw up relationships?
Well, so for me, in my mind, when someone does not have a sense of purpose, when they're not spiritually connected, if they're spiritually bankrupt, let's put it that way, it makes it too easy. There's no reason to do the right thing. There is no sense of accountability.
You mean if we're just here by random chance?
Go do what you want. Go play, do what you want. You don't have to be kind. You don't have to be truthful. You don't have to do a lot of things that you're held accountable to if you do believe in a much higher purpose.
So it's easier to have an affair.
It's easier to do a lot of things, yeah. And so, but if you...
easier to be mean.
Now, that doesn't mean people that have that sense of purpose or believe in God or whatever, you want to call it, have that sense of meaning and purpose in their lives. That doesn't mean they won't make those mistakes. They clearly do. But they typically learn from them and feel bad about it and try to become better as a result. That's the difference, right? So do you learn from your mistakes? Do you try to be a better person? Do you have a sense of responsibility and accountability? Are you willing to apologize for your past? Or do you just think, well, so what? We're only here once. Let's go live and party and, have a good time. Live hard, die young, leave a good looking corpse. I mean, what is it's an 80s rock star thing. What is your live hard, die young, leave a good looking corpse? Yeah. So,
but it's only good looking for
it's only good looking if you die young. So, but yeah, if you have no sense of accountability, it's easy to do that, right? Sex, drugs, rock and roll, baby. I mean, whatever. There's no reason to do something more than for yourself in the moment. It's selfish.
I think of, part of my purpose is to be a good partner, because we are better together rather than...
way more powerful too.
Just separate. And I think sharing a purpose of being of service is helpful.
Super helpful.
As well, because then we can share the joy and we can share the stories and we can do the work like we do with the Brain Warriors Way podcast. That's a purposeful thing we do on a regular basis. I think we're 420 podcasts or something
and it's
crazy.
So fun.
I want you to think about how you can bring purpose into your relationships. What are the things you can do together that really bring a deeper sense of meaning and purpose to your lives?
And if you don't have one, and I'm actually curious too to hear from people. Have your behaviors been selfish? If you can be honest about that, if it's been self-centered because you don't have that sense of purpose, then if you're honest about that, it gives you a starting place to change it. So, let us know. This is a place for me to change. It's a place for me to start. It's really important.
And just something super simple.
Right.
What is the one thing I can do today to have a meaningful life?
I like
Or
the
what
two
is
questions.
the thing we can do together?
I love the question, and you taught me this question. Why is the world a better place because I breathe? That instantly puts responsibility on you. Why is the world a better place because I breathe or because you breathe? So that's something I taught Chloe when she used to say, it's not fair. Life isn't fair. It's about you taking responsibility and making it better, right? So I love that you taught me that one. And one of my favorites is, does it have eternal value? Because then instantly that puts things in perspective. If I'm mad, if I'm frustrated, if I'm self-centered, does it have eternal value? Am I going to think about this 10 minutes from now, 5 years from now? If not, that is not a purposeful thing to be thinking about.
And one of my favorite exercises I did in college, I took a death and dying class.
Me
I
too.
think you did
Yeah,
too.
it was really
actually
great.
writing your funeral.
Yeah.
At the end of your life, what is it you want people
and that really
not really what people think of me, because I've learned that's
doesn't
just
matter.
a trap. What
do you
is
want to
it
think
that
of
I
yourself?
would have wanted to accomplish,
Right.
or what has been important?
How do you want to be been thought about? That's what's important.
Or
But that
what
lends
would
itself
I
to, does it have
think
eternal value?
about me
Yeah.
at the end of my life? Have I lived a life worth living? And was I a great partner?
And you know what's so important about that? In my 20s, like, I love that question, because in my 20s, I'd have been like, oh dear. But then in my 30s, I started working hard toward that. And now at this point in my life, I feel like it's manifesting, and it's such a great place to be. But asking yourself that question can really stop you dead in your tracks. Like, at the end of my life, if I had a funeral right now, are people going to get up and say the things about me that I wish they would have said? So that will I be the person that I wanted to be?
Well, I don't know. With my children, it's actually scary. I'm not sure what they're going to say, and I'm glad I won't be there, I suppose. So, from a spiritual standpoint, how does that influence your relationship? Post that. And then tag the Brain Warriors Way podcast. Leave us a review on brainwarriorswaypodcast.com. And this whole series, what are the 3 or 4 ways, what are the things you do to mess up your relationship? Because if you know what they are, you can change it. Stay with us.
If you're enjoying the Brain Warriors Way podcast, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode. And while you're at it, feel free to give us a review or 5-star rating, as that helps others find the podcast.
If you're interested in coming to Amen Clinics, use the code PODCAST10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com. For more information, give us a call at 855-978-1363.